My name is Lydia Kostopoulos, and I'm a strategy and emerging technologies advisor with a deep passion for body data tracking and human performance. This set of healthy aging protocol interviews delves into perimenopause, specifically the perimenopause game plan. Such an important life event that women experience requires a game plan, is my thought. And so in this series, I'll be interviewing people to ask them, what is their game plan? How are they going through it? How are they preparing for it? How are they posturing for it? I hope you enjoy these set of interviews. Jennifer, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about your healthy aging protocol and your perimenopause game plan.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you about this.
Could we first start with an introduction? Tell us what it is you do, all things Jennifer.
I actually wear a couple of different hats. So I am a research scientist. So I have a PhD and I have a research lab at the Buck Institute, which is just north of San Francisco in the Bay Area. And we are focused on trying to understand what the underlying mechanisms are of aging. And the reason for that is, if you think about it, most of the chronic diseases of the modern world, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative disease, cancer, things like that, autoimmune disease, these are all, we think about like risk factors related to them as being specific to the disease, but actually the number one risk factor for every single one of them is your age. And so the older you are, the more likely you are to be suffering from one or more of these age-related chronic diseases. So the idea is that if we can understand what the underlying mechanisms are that are driving aging, independence of any of those diseases, that we could then tackle all of them at the same time. So it's a compelling thesis. We have yet to figure out what's causing aging, so hopefully we'll get there. Anyway, my research lab is focused on trying to understand how changes in the communication between the brain and the rest of the body during aging can lead to things like systemic aging. So we think a lot about the chemical conversation that's going on between the brain and peripheral tissues, particularly the brain and the ovary. So about 5 years ago, we got really interested in trying to understand how changes in that mind-body connection can really influence things like perimenopause and menopause in the middle of a woman's life. And there's a lot of sex-specific differences there too. I'll stop talking about that. The other hat that I wear is that when we started looking into this area of science, it was really clear to me that there's a huge hole in our knowledge. So we really don't understand how female bodies work, period. Like, forget about aging. We just don't understand the first thing about how females' bodies work. And that's reflected in, I mean, if you're a woman, that's reflected in what happens when you go to see your physician, especially in the second half of your adult life, if you're lucky enough to live to old age. So we started here at the Buck Institute, we started a couple of initiatives to focus on trying to understand aging in women, healthy aging in women, through the lens of ovarian function. So I think about ovaries as like the pacemakers for aging in women's bodies. And that comes as a surprise to some people, but if you step back and recognize that ovaries are absolutely essential for reproduction and fertility, but they're also doing something else. So they're endocrine organs, which means that they're producing dozens of chemicals, hormones. We always talk about the big three: estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, but ovaries are making lots of different signaling molecules that are literally signaling to every tissue in a female body. So they're signaling to brain and heart and bone and liver and every organ in your body, skin. And when ovaries stop working, start to go through these sort of fluctuations and decline in midlife, that really has a dramatic impact on your risk of developing a whole host of different diseases. So I think about healthy aging in women as really preserving ovarian function. And I'm not talking about necessarily the fertility aspect. I'm really talking about this kind of signaling that happens. So, and I'm sorry, I'm just really talking a lot. You should interrupt me.
No, please, no,
I
no,
can talk
please
about this all day.
It's helpful to understand how this is happening.
Yeah, well, once you start to really understand it, it's like going through the stages of grief. There's like dramatic anger once you recognize how little we know and how big the problem is. Then there's just like acceptance, and then there's like how can we fix this? So from my perspective, the thing that's the most pressing for us to address is this lack of data. We can't have effective medical treatments. We can't have effective interventions until we actually understand how the system works. And so about 4 years ago now, we started a Global Consortium. It's a nonprofit that is focused on basically funding the research around this space, building out the ecosystem of everyone who has an interest in understanding how female bodies work. So scientists, doctors, investors, companies, everybody. And the goal here is to really understand what is driving ovarian aging. What is it that so reproducibly tells a woman's ovaries to start aging when she's in her late 20s, early 30s. We don't understand it. And the fact that ovaries are aging decades before the rest of a woman's body is the issue. Like, if I could sum up what we're trying to do in one sentence, it is that we want to sync up aging in ovaries with aging in the rest of a woman's body, which is what happens in men's bodies. So, male reproductive organs also age. That reproductive aging happens in men as well. The difference is that it really is synced up with aging in the rest of their tissues. And that disparity between aging in ovaries and aging in the rest of my body is what, that's what causes menopause. And that is also what is going to essentially, when I go through menopause, predispose me to like huge increase in risk for cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, cognitive decline, autoimmune disease, all of these things that happen after menopause. So we're trying to fund scientists to study this. We're trying to advocate for other funding sources like the NIH and global governmental bodies worldwide, private foundations, to focus on this as a really important problem. So we do a lot of advocacy. And then we build resources for those scientists and doctors to work together.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And so I think, if I'm not mistaken, the ovaries age 2.5 times faster than the rest of the body, right? Or is it 2 times faster? I can't remember.
It depends on how you can, I would say some people, there's a range of numbers that you'll find. If you're talking about function, then I think you can easily say it's somewhere between 2.5 and 5 times the rate of the rest of your tissues. So if you think about, functional decline with age, your organs aren't aging at exactly the same rate. There's a little bit of difference there. But what you can say is that most of the decline happens, if you're lucky enough to live to old age, most of the decline happens in those last few decades of life. Whereas ovaries really fall off that curve, right? The decline happens in a dramatic way, and it happens right in the middle of a woman's life. So as we're thinking about like extending healthy longevity, and I don't mean lifespan, I mean health span, the number of years you're healthy. If we don't start thinking about menopause and reproductive organ decline in the middle of a woman's life, then soon women will be living more of their lives after menopause, in this period of time when they have these increased health risks, than before menopause. And so there's really, I think, an equality issue here, and there's something here that really sets up a dramatic disparity between men and women.
Well, I'm so glad that you are working on it and that your lab exists.
Oh, it's not just my lab. We've funded 49 scientists all over the world, and we will continue to fund them for, as much money as I can raise for the grants. We will give that money away.
That's amazing. So I think just more good things to come on that realm. But given what you know, what is your healthy aging protocol before we get into your perimenopause game plan specifically? Like, what is your healthy aging protocol?
It's not going to be anything that's groundbreaking or earth-shattering, and it won't come as any surprise to anyone in the audience. The first thing to say is that I'm a PhD scientist. I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm not giving anyone medical advice. I'm just going to tell you about what I do. Everything that I do is really framed through what I know about my family history, and also what I know about myself, because I think motivation levels for actually doing things are different, and it's really important to recognize, like, internally who you are, what you're capable of, and what you're not capable of. And for me, I know who I am. So I have a history of 2 things in my family that are really prevalent. One is osteoporosis. So both my great grandmother and my grandmother on my mother's side have severe osteoporosis, to the point where my grandmother actually has had multiple spine surgeries, and she has hardware. She's
Mm.
like a bionic woman, in her spine, because of severe osteoporosis. So I think a lot about how to maintain my bone mass with age. So I actually do get periodic DEXA scans. So that's a very non-invasive way to measure, not just visceral fat, but also bone density. And I spend a lot of time doing strength and resistance training. So my healthy aging protocol is really thinking about my lifestyle, diet and exercise, like what I put into my body and how I move my body. So for me, I like to run. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to keep that up as I age in terms of like my joints. Um, we know from Blue Zone research that if you walk at least 6 hours a week, that can really dramatically decrease your risk of cardiovascular disease. So I have a history of heart disease in my family as well. And that's something that I think about a lot as well. So even though I'm only in my late 40s, I have a cardiologist. I get preventative care, and everything that I do is a conversation between me and my physicians. Um, I have a treadmill, a walking treadmill in my office. So I'm sitting right now at my desk, but it's a standing desk that can go up and down. And so when I'm in my office and I'm doing something where I don't necessarily I'm not, recording an interview, for example, I'm doing something where I can get my work done, but also be walking, then I'm on my treadmill. And I have, a pair of shoes that stay in my office. Like, for those of you who are of a certain age, you'll remember Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, where he would come in and like change his sweater and change his shoes. I do that when I'm going to be in my office for long periods of time. And then I try to get outside. I try to do things not just in the gym, but outdoors. In terms of like actual exercise, I have a weight training protocol, which includes actual, like hand weights. I do Pilates, machine Pilates. I do yoga sometimes, not all the time. Yoga is something for me that is meditative. And so I don't really think of it as exercise. It's more just about like calming my internal uh, nerves and things like that. And I like to do things outside with other people. So I'm really lucky to live in an area where we have just a real rich outdoor activity menu available to us. So I go hiking. Sometimes I will take a very quick cold dip in the ocean because the Pacific here is incredibly cold and it never gets warm.
You're brave.
A dip. I don't even mean like a plunge. I mean like a dip. I ski. I love to ski. So in the winter I do that. And when I have the opportunity to travel to places where the ocean is warm, my favorite thing in the world is to swim in the ocean. So, oh, and that's all moving. Thinking about my diet, I don't have time, and I also don't have the motivation to document every calorie that I ingest or document every piece of food that I put into my mouth. And some people do, and I have incredible respect for them. But I just don't have that level of motivation. So, and I'm busy. Like I have a lot of work. I'm doing at least 2 jobs, and so I travel a lot. So I try to make it easy to make the like good healthy choices. So I don't keep junk food in my refrigerator at home. If I'm going to look for a snack, the only things that are there are going to be things that are at least reasonably healthy. I I think about how much fiber I'm getting, I think about how much protein I'm getting, and I think about how much fish I'm eating. So I try to incorporate fish into my diet every week. I try to get enough protein every day, particularly thinking about building lean muscle. And I try very hard to not eat processed foods. I try hard not to eat fried foods. I do eat all of those things, but I don't keep them at home. I take advantage again of where I live, and I'm very privileged to be in a position to be able to do this, but I do use prepared meal services. So for dinner, for example, there's always going to be a couple of fresh meals in my fridge that I can heat up that have all the nutritional information on them. And and then when I go out, I try to, if there's a choice of something fried and something not fried, I try to go with the something not fried. But beyond that, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what I eat. I know that there are people who have the discipline to really go for it, and I say, I'm all on board for that. It's just not something that I'm capable of personally.
Well, that's fine. So I hear the movement part, I hear the food part, and I hear the proactive kind of this conversation you're having with your family history past and your body's present. And you're being proactive about
Yeah, that's a
leveraging
good way
that
to put it.
information. And then you're getting the data that you need to kind of track those particular things. And then you are consulting professionals to kind of help you guide your way through that. And then just one other question around the healthy aging protocol. Is there anything you do around your human connections, your relationships in your lives? Or is that a community? Is there anything in your protocol that you look at in that space?
I wouldn't say that I spend any time actively or proactively planning in that space, but I definitely have close friends that I keep in touch with. I have three sisters, and we're all very close. Because I travel a lot for work, it's actually straightforward for me to see people who I love and who are important to me. I can see them pretty frequently because I often travel to cities where they live, or it can sometimes be quite straightforward to route my travel through a particular place if I want to see someone. Um, for me, I think I have a really wonderful friend group, and we keep in touch through WhatsApp. We keep in touch. Some of us have Slack channels that we share, and so even if someone isn't nearby physically all the time, I have a really wonderful tribe uh, that I can call on at any time of day, independence of where they are in the world. So that's really important to me. I'm also an introvert. I don't. Uh, at baseline, I like to sit by myself, like snuggled up on the couch with my cat and a book. So I also do spend a decent amount of time taking care of myself by myself, and that's just me. I think everyone has a different sort of rhythm that is important to pay attention to. Yeah, so I guess I don't really have a plan or something in place that's like a purposeful um, social structure, but it's certainly an important part of healthy aging. And there's no question that as people enter older age, that and of course, when you enter older age, you're more likely to have those people who are close to you pass away. It's really important to keep those social connections. So, as a part of my, I'm anticipating and hoping that I will make it to old age. And so as part of that planning, actually, and because as many people have, I've had to think hard about what to do with my older relatives as they age and they lose the people closest to them, to help them, not be isolated and to be in places where they're getting the care they need. I'm thinking hard about where I want to be when I'm 80, 90, 100. And I will put in place a plan that includes not just all of my medical directives and my wishes for my own body, but also like, here's the place where I want to be. Like physically, this is the community that I want to be in, whether it's a retirement community or, something that has more sophisticated medical care. And also, here's the bank account that you need to pay for this. So all of those kinds of plans I think are really important to make so that I won't put any undue burden on the people that I care about as I get older.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's so interesting to think about, like, when you talk about the community in the future, because a lot of people don't think necessarily about that kind of social part of their later life and aging. And so it's nice to hear you say that you're thinking about that today.
Can I say one more thing that is maybe unique to the fact that I'm at the Buck Institute, but and some of my colleagues are, I have a colleague who is actually a gerontologist, so a physician, a practicing physician whose his job is to care for older people. And it's a fascinating area of medicine, one that I think is deeply underserved. There's just not enough geriatricians, physicians who are really versed in this. But it's fascinating to hear about the kinds of challenges that he encounters with older people and their medical care. And I think one of the considerations for me personally, because I'm exposed to all of this, is really to think hard about like physically where I'll be located, but also what is the kinds of care that are available to the people in those communities. So is there someone who is actually a trained geriatrician on staff, as opposed to just having a primary care doctor who happens to take care of old people? It's really a different area of medicine. There's so many things that they have to take into account that can make the difference between someone continuing to age healthy and happy, and making medical mistakes that could be avoided if they were trained to take care of old people or older people. So that's just something else that I keep in mind.
I mean, it definitely having that exposure gives you kind of a front seat to all of that and makes you reflect differently. And I think that by 2050, I think the statistic is that 2/3 of the world's population is going to be above 50 or above 55. And we're going to start to see larger populations that are in the older space that require more medical attention. And so I think all the more reason we're having this intersection come into play where we're living longer lives, and then there's more of us living those longer lives. So I think that you're at the forefront of that. But maybe it'll become mainstream by 2050 for people to be thinking about these things as well, is what I'm hoping.
I hope so. I think that the fact that we're having this conversation and you're not the first person to ask me these kinds of questions is testament to the fact that people are waking up to this it's something that, diet and lifestyle, these are interventions that you can apply now, that you can think about on your own, that, people have agency and control over some aspects of how they age in that sense.
So this is actually a really great segue into the perimenopause game plan, because my thought is that for such an important life event that we know is going to happen, it's important to have self-determination, as much of it as one can, and plan for that. So in that sense, how are you practicing self-determination, health agency in your perimenopause game plan?
I think because I spend every day, all day, thinking about this from a scientific perspective, I have a plan, and the basis for it really is just, this is what I tell my friends and my family members, is to, as much as possible, understand your own body at baseline. And so for some people that's possible, for younger women who aren't quite yet at perimenopause, it's easy to establish a baseline, and that means working with your doctor or doctors to know, what your cycle looks like, to understand, how long your cycle is, to understand what your baseline hormone levels are, to understand what your baseline cardiovascular markers are, to understand how your metabolism impacts the rest of your body, right? So we're all different in terms of like what our baseline cholesterol levels are, and there's a lot of data points that you can, while we're still in the dark about really what the right things to measure are to understand reproductive span or ovarian function over time, there are a lot of things that we can measure to take the pulse of our overall health and well-being. And I think this comes back to the idea that I think for most of history, women's health has been sidelined and really categorized as like a niche subcategory of medicine because we've focused it through this lens of fertility. But it comes back to this idea that your body is it's a functioning whole, and so optimizing every part of the system is important. Your metabolism is linked to your ovarian function. Your cognitive function is linked to ovarian function. Everything is linked together. And so if one part of the system is underperforming, that can have knock-on effects through to all the other parts. So understanding what your baseline is, what your normal is, I think is the key to, at least for me, to thinking about what a perimenopause game plan would look like. And so then, monitoring at some intervals so that you can start to know when things change. And I think perimenopause is laden with symptoms. There's lots of numbers bandied about, but I would say there's at least 135 potential symptoms of perimenopause. And the reason that that number is so huge is because it comes back to this idea that ovaries are endocrine organs, and they're making lots and lots and lots of signaling molecules that are talking to every tissue in your body. And so when those levels start to fluctuate, which is what happens in perimenopause, it's not like they just all go down, they start to fluctuate. So if you think about the chemical symphony coming from your ovaries, it really is a symphony. So like every instrument is playing a different tune at different times. It's a symphony, and every part of it is, lots of them are linked. So when this one goes up, this one goes down. And so when things start changing in ways that aren't necessarily, I don't want to say that aren't right, but that when things start changing, it throws everything off. And that's why the symptoms are so varied between individuals, because it can go wrong in so many different ways. If you just imagine, imagine a symphony where the conductor, turns around and stops conducting, and at the same time, all the sheet music disappears, and nobody in the symphony has memorized the notes. So
that's so chaotic.
It's very chaotic, and your body has, like homeostatic systems. So those systems that are in place to keep everything within a very narrow range, those homeostats are very strong. And so if something goes out of range, there's a lot of stuff that your body does to try to get it back. But if you have a system where everything is integrated and talking to each other, when one thing goes off and your body tries to correct it, it might have knock-on effects on other things. So I think that's why there's so many different symptoms. Anyway, tracking your symptoms, right? So I can tell you that when brain fog hits, it's disorienting and weird, but it's also pretty obvious what's happening. So keeping track of symptoms that might be attributable to perimenopause, I think, are really important. And then discussing those with your doctor and thinking about, whether or not hormone therapy might be something that would be right for you. For me, I don't have any risk factors. I intend to take hormone therapy for my entire adult life after it becomes necessary. Like I said, I get DEXA scans, so I'm paying attention to my bone density and my muscle mass, because those are the things that absolutely, after menopause, your muscle mass declines and your bone density goes down. And they're related, of course. And for me, I do not want, I would prefer not to have osteoporosis. So that's something that I think hard about. Let's see. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit off track here.
So we have the understanding the chaos of the orchestra. So because you understand the chaos of the orchestra, your perimenopause game plan includes making sure that the conductor's there through a form of hormone replacement therapy that makes sense for you. And then you've got the tracking, and what comes out very clear is like the baseline.
Yeah, knowing your body, like know thyself.
Know thyself. And so you have an empirical approach. But now that you mentioned that, do you have so that there's some quantitative data, but is there any kind of qualitative aspect to know thyself for you that you are also looking at?
Yeah, if you start to pay attention to your body and you get in tune with what's normal for you, it's very easy to see when something is not right, when something's off. So I mostly don't drink alcohol, and that's not not because I don't enjoy drinking wine or cocktails. It's because as I've gotten older into my 40s, drinking alcohol dramatically impacts my ability to sleep. And so another big
Mhm.
piece of the perimenopause game plan puzzle for me is making sure that I get enough quality sleep. If I have a glass of wine or a cocktail, I guarantee you that I will fall asleep just fine. And then somewhere around 2 a.m., I will wake up and not be able to go back to sleep for many hours, no matter what I do. If I don't get a good night's sleep, it really ruins the next day for me.
Mhm.
So getting healthy sleep is really important. And that has, that's not always easy. And as women age, they do tend to have more difficulty sleeping and getting quality sleep. I haven't gone so far as to like go to a sleep clinic because I don't think I have any real pathology there. I think it's just, I don't want to say normal, but it's just the very common problems that happen to women in particular as they age. And so I do things like I have I have light blocking curtains, and in my bedroom I actually have the rails so that no light gets in. So when my curtains are down, even if it's the middle of the day, my room is pitch black. I don't bring any devices with me to bed. I start to wear blue light blocking glasses a few hours before I want to go to sleep. Not just because of screens, because of course you can put filters on your screens to filter out blue light, but ambient light has blue light as well, especially
Mhm.
the lights in your house. So I wear that you can buy on Amazon, really cute and very cheap frames that don't have any prescription. And I have a bunch of really cute glasses, and I wear those no matter what I'm doing.
Well, I'm glad they're cute because otherwise,
Well, makes me want to wear them, so that helps
I know,
too.
I
So I
know.
put those on a few hours before I want to go to bed. And to be honest, I have this thing. I have had perfect vision for over a decade because I had laser eye surgery a while ago. But now I have the age-related can't see things close up. So I also have strewn all over my house in every bag that I have, often on top of my head when I'm not talking to the camera. I have readers, those glasses that have a very mild prescription for close-up reading. And I have versions of those too that have blue light blocking
Nice.
properties. So I do that, and then I don't eat a few hours before bed. So I do think about when I eat during the day. And then I also have some like more fancy kind of sleep related things that like control my temperature through the night. And while I can recommend them, they're not cheap. So I don't want to say that they're necessary, but everything is in service of trying to get a really good night's sleep.
So this is now the sleep hygiene aspect of your game plan. Got the tracking, the hormones, and then the sleep component. That's really cool.
And oh, related to sleep, yeah, I think I do travel a lot for work, and so I think that could be incredibly detrimental to my health if I wasn't really careful about jet lag. And so I have a jet lag protocol that's based on a paper, which I'm happy to share with you. It is the
Yeah.
scientific paper that is written by sleep experts, and it is dense, meaning it's not an easy read, but it does have these beautiful figures, which, one figure is for traveling east, one figure is for traveling west, and it has a picture of if you're shifting by 3 hours or 6 hours or 9 hours or 12 hours, here's like a little diagram of what you need to do. And it incorporates melatonin. And so that's something that, again, I would talk to a doctor about before you take melatonin.
Mhm.
Melatonin does more than just promote sleep. It is also one of these signaling molecules that your brain uses to do all kinds of things. And so I
Mhm.
take very, very small doses of melatonin, like less than what you would give to a child. But when,
Mhm.
if you're not producing melatonin at the right times, it can really deeply impact your sleep. And when you travel to a new time zone, resetting your clock requires getting melatonin at the right time. It has information about when you should be exposed to light. And so those blue light
Mhm.
blocking glasses come in handy there too. And then
Oh,
if I can't, and then it tells you when you need to be asleep. And if you are in a place where you can't sleep, sometimes I do take sleep aids that have been prescribed to me by my doctor. So, anyway, there's also an app. I think it's called Time Shifter, which is like
Mhm.
it's like a light version of that very dense scientific paper. So that might be a nice place to start if someone is interested in trying to minimize jet lag.
I will definitely include that in. That's very fascinating. One last question, though, about that. I travel intercontinentally quite a bit, and I have used one of these apps.
Yeah.
Have not read that dense paper, but I look forward to it. But the thing is that like when they said, this is when you should like sleep, and it's when I needed to be on stage speaking. So like, how do you deal with that part?
Yeah, I mean, you do your best, right? There's only
Okay.
so much that you can do. Actually, one of the things that I really like about the paper is that if you the diagrams are tiny, and actually, so I have my own. I converted into a spreadsheet, and I have my own versions of them so that I can like change them for each trip. Because for a while I was just printing out this page and then like writing on it, and um, again, like I can't see things that are that small. But if you pay attention to what they're doing, they're basically shifting you a little bit each day. And so there's a day or two before you travel where you can do stuff. And so you can kind of see what the pattern is, and then you can back it
Hmm.
up. You can try to, ahead of time for a day or two, change things in a way that'll at least bias you towards not having jet
Hmm.
lag. I don't get jet lag so much anymore.
You're a pro like that. You got it down.
You gotta be, I mean, it's a necessity for me. So
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share your healthy aging protocol, these amazing tips for intercontinental travel, and your perimenopause game plan. And thank you also for all the amazing work you do. And I look forward to continuing to follow your progress and your research. So thank you so much.
yeah, thanks for chatting with me. This was fun.
This series is meant to capture personal stories of individual healthy aging protocols and is for informational purposes only, and it does not constitute providing medical advice or professional services. Those seeking personal medical advice should consult with a licensed healthcare practitioner.